Hey folks, it's your girl Lexi Mahari back with another episode of Buzzworthy ChitChat. And in this episode, we are going to unpack Porsha Family Matters, episode 6, The Ghosts of Porsha. Were we bamboozled? Let's chat. We are back with another episode of Buzzworthy Chit Chat. But before we dive into this week's episode, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can receive a notification each time I upload a video. So let's dive into Sunday night's episode of Porsha Family Matters, episode 6, The Ghosts of Porsha. And, I have to hand it to the producers. That title is apt for what we witnessed in this week's episode. And, as I said before, I'm not going to go into too much of a detail by detail recap, but I am going to touch on the high points of this week's episode. It was definitely a continuation of the climactic fight that broke out in last week's episode between Porsha, her family, and Dennis and his mother. And, I still am not quite sure what we were looking at, what triggered the physical altercation that ensued. But again, what I feel like I saw this week is as Dennis and his mother were making their exit at Porsha's behest, something transpired that we could not see on the camera between Porsha and Dennis's mother. And from what I saw, it looked like Porsha was about to lunge at Dennis's mother, and perhaps Dennis read something in that and he blocked the lunge. And in his physical efforts to block the lunge, that triggered the physical interaction between him and Porsha, and then of course Porsha's family leaping to her defense, and then other things that were happening as a result of people either trying to hold Porsha back or trying to move Dennis and his mother away from Porsha. There's one point even where we see Porsha's aunt, I think her name is Denise, is holding on to the back of Dennis, trying to push him out. And in her efforts to, I guess, push him out, you see her kind of fall to the floor. And then I don't know if that then led people to believe that he had somehow pushed her down to the floor. I don't know, but you see like extra things happening in that moment as well. In addition to that, we see Lauren, screaming, trying to get Dennis and his mother to leave. And the next thing we know, I think as Porsha and Dennis and the security team are, in their physical altercation moment, we see Lauren start to pound on Dennis. So I'm still not quite sure what triggered all of that, but let's just say, again, it was not a good look for Porsha. We really saw her lose it, in which she was picking up pretty much anything she could get her hands on and throwing it at Dennis. I don't know if she was aiming at his mother as well. Perhaps she was, but she was definitely throwing objects in their direction, big, small. I mean, it appeared that she picked up some equipment that belonged to the filming crew. It looked like she might have even picked up some type of, I don't know if that was a part of the restaurant, like a rack or something, and hurled it at him. But she was out of control, and it took Simon and her cousin to try to restrain her, to calm her down. Her Aunt Liz even went over at one point to try to pray over her to get her to calm down. And so again, it was a horrible look, and honestly made me sad as a viewer to watch all of that going down, because again, they were supposed to be there for Pilar. This was supposed to be a trip designed to help settle things on behalf of their daughter Pilar. So therefore, I found everything that we saw a bit tragic on some levels. Let's call it what it is. It's a level of entertainment when you see the physical altercation ensue in any event, right? Because who knows what any of us would do in a moment if we're pushed to the quote unquote brink of emotions. So when you see someone react that way, yeah, it's entertaining to watch on some level. It's like an accident that you can't look away from. But if we add the human side to what was supposed to be happening, the whole point of the trip, it's disheartening. Aunt Liz, I thought, wow, she was much this trip and kind of like our sanity meter in what we were watching and what we were trying to, I think, digest in the moment of all of that was going down. Portia definitely needed someone to pray over her and calm her down because Simon wasn't really doing much other than physically restraining her. Um, her cousins, I don't think they had the power, quote unquote power, to settle her down, honestly. Her entourage assistants that were there honestly fed the fuel that led to that. So it's, Aunt Liz was like the sanity meter, the calming factor that, honestly Portia needed in that moment to settle her down. So, I said I wasn't going to recap, but we have to talk about what happened the next day as we're watching this. Because again, for us, the viewer, we're here because we're wanting to see, quote, reality TV, right? This is supposed to be a reality series in which we are observing human emotion and human interaction. And so the fact that Portia, according to what we saw on the show this week, the fact that we are being told that Portia allegedly called all of her family members and told them not to talk about what had transpired was highly frustrating because okay, you had this huge fight with the baby of your sorry, you had this huge fight with the father of your baby and his mother, and yet we're not going to talk about it. A good chunk of your family was trying to restrain you, or they were attacking Dennis and his mother and or security and or producers, but somehow we're not going to talk about what the viewer just saw. And or even for these people, what I like to do is, again, if I'm watching what is supposed to be reality TV, I am putting myself in the shoes of some of the people that I'm looking at. And if I had either participated in that fight in some way, or I had just been sitting at the table like Aunt Liz. Hats off to Aunt Liz, who just kind of sat back while all that was going on. She was just seated at the table, looking at this as if she were some kind of, like it was a movie. She was just sitting back watching all of this ensue. So let's say your Aunt Liz just sitting there watching all this happen, watching the young people fight. Why are we not talking about this the next day? And so, we're sitting here watching them go to their retreat. Of course, the elephant in the room is Dennis and his mom and the woman left the next day after the fight. So the people who you really needed to be on this retreat are now no longer there. And all we have is Portia's family and entourage and Simon. So the producers thankfully call it out. And I was thankful for this, right? Because, if you are a Bravo fan, if you've watched some of these shows, um, Housewives of Potomac, the producers on some of these shows have a tendency to not call out some things that, we the viewers are like, oh, come on now, we're not going to talk about this, right? So here we are in this situation where these family members are not discussing what transpired the night before. And it's because Portia has told them not to talk about it, allegedly. So the producers call this out, thankfully. And, everyone, even in the diary rooms, the place where they're giving their perspective of what has transpired, these people are still tight lipped, not saying a word or giving any thought to what happened. And even when Aunt Liz brings up Mama Gina's name, as she talks about someone who has maybe benefited from that retreat that they were on, you can see people tensing up. Like she's not supposed to bring up her name, like she's Candyman. So the producers call this out, thankfully, as I'm rambling here. The producers call this out, and we see that, clearly Portia does not want them to talk about this. And she, in essence, kind of ends the scene. It's like the scene gets shut down and they don't even address it really until, I guess later that night. I think it was that night at the dinner or something to that effect. But even then, it wasn't like a full on addressment of, or it was not a full they did not fully address everything that transpired, what triggered all of that. Porsha saying she, quote, blacked out, when she later talks to her mother about it. And again, if you've been viewing this show, if you've watched Porsha over the years, somehow she's always blacking out when we're having these physical, when these physical altercations occur, she somehow blacks out and doesn't remember things. But, we are now post production, and, I am hearing, I haven't seen everything, but I've heard some commentary that she is, saying that what we saw now is not everything that transpired. And that may very well be true. It is editing. They can only squeeze so much into the 1 hour block. But if you blacked out, how do you recall what really happened? But, maybe she saw all the footage. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't think that this show has been a very good look for Porsha, and I don't know that if it went at all the way she had hoped it would. Again, I mentioned in one of my previous videos and or podcasts that Porsha was supposedly putting together a show where we were going to get to hear more about her family legacy and her activism. And so we were supposed to hear more about her family in that way. And so I was really glad that the producers did leave in her visit with her Aunt Liz, because, that's where we saw the foundation. We heard from Aunt Liz about the work that they do. We heard a little bit about her family history, and she touched on the fact that they were at this place where they needed to hand down the legacy to somebody else. And of course they are. I think Liz is in her 70s, so they are in a place where they're clearly trying to identify who is going to carry this legacy forward. And, I don't know much about Portia's other sibling, but apparently they may have thought it was going to be Porsha to some extent based on her recent activism. And it's really unfortunate that, based on what happened in Mexico, Liz was like, I don't think she's ready. And, as a viewer, I would say the same thing. And as a woman of a certain age, I would say the same thing. I don't think she is ready I do not believe Porsha is 100% ready to assume responsibility for that legacy. I don't know if it's supposed to just be her. There are other children in the family, right? Other grandchildren, who potentially, I would think, could potentially carry that forward. But, clearly all eyes were on Porsha. I imagine just for the fact that she has this platform. She is a well known, pop culture figure who could easily use her platform to help promote awareness of her family's legacy and on all of the things that they have done for civil rights, as well as, I would say, some of the things they continue to do today. So her visit with her Aunt Liz, I thought, was an excellent inclusion in the show, and that's what the whole show was supposed to be about. For me, I think it made Liz's presence a bit more relevant. I mean, for now, at this point, she's just kind of been the elder voice of reason on the show, who has continued to remind us that she wasn't here for that drama stuff that's been unfolding, but that she's supposed to be there to talk about the family and what the family represented, and, how it's impacted all of their lives, particularly her life. And so when she attempted to point out to Porsha that the company she is keeping is not really working in her best interest, and that, she is the one who's going to suffer as a result of the people she is keeping around her, as well as her daughter potentially, it just kind of went over Portia's head. And it was really disappointing to see that, because, while, I say I'm not a huge fan of Porsha, but, I root for all of the housewives, particularly all the housewives of Atlanta, all of the housewives of Potomac. I root for these ladies. Um, and so I was really hoping that she had somehow learned from past mistakes, right? We all relapse sometimes. So we can't say that any of us are flawless as human beings. We're human. So it's natural for us to fall back into bad behavior. It's kind of like, the way we go about eating each day. We try to eat healthy foods, but it's natural for us to relapse into a binging pattern potentially, right? So I can look at it the same way for Porsha. Of course, I don't expect her to be perfect. Of course, she's going to have her moments, but what we saw this week, it showed no growth at all. And, when her Aunt Liz tried to point that out to her, I didn't hear 40-year-old Porsha. I heard what sounded like a 20-something-year-old Porsha. And that was really disappointing. I don't know if she watched the episode back. I hope maybe she heard her Aunt Liz this time around. I don't know. But, Aunt Liz, she is probably the MVP of the show at this point. The maturity level that is there to try to guide Porsha, the 40-year-old Porsha, is a welcomed asset to the show. So, I find myself ending today's episode saying that, you know, this show took Porsha down the wrong road. I don't know if it's a great look for her, but when we think about the child, it's that piece for me. I think that's a little disappointing. When I say wrong road, I mean wrong road for Porsha as it related to what she was supposed to be doing, which was to champion the legacy of her family. And if truly she was also supposed to be working on blending her family with Dennis and Simon, so that it benefited Pilar. It's unfortunate that she was derailed in the way that she was, whether by her own um, antics and denial of what she is still dealing with when it comes to Dennis, as well as the people, the company she's keeping at this point. It was just really unfortunate that. But hey, what are your thoughts? Did you not have any issues with what you saw happen? Do you feel like Porsha did what she had to do on behalf of her family? Do you think Dennis was truly trying to attack her and beat her up in the episode? Share your thoughts. Maybe I missed something. I would love to hear from you. Well, folks, that's it for today's episode of Buzzworthy Chit Chat. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. Before we go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next video.